Chapter 3. It takes no great effort to find work in the giant anthill of an advanced capitalist society. That is, of course, so long as you're not asking the impossible. When I still had my office, I did my share of editing and writing, and I'd gotten to know a few professionals in the field. So, as I embarked on a freelance career, there was no major retooling required. I didn't need much to live on anyway. I pulled out my address book and made some calls. I asked if there was work available. I said I'd been laying back but was ready to take stuff on. Almost immediately, jobs came my way, though no particularly interesting jobs, mostly filler for PR newsletters and company brochures. Speaking conservatively, I'd say half the material I wrote was meaningless, of no conceivable use to anyone, a waste of pulp and ink. But I did the work mechanically without thinking. At first, the load wasn't much, maybe a couple of hours a day. The rest of the time, I'd be out walking or seeing a movie. I saw a lot of movies. For 3 months, I had an easy time of it. I was slowly getting back in touch. Then in early autumn, things began to change. Work orders increased dramatically. The phone rang non-stop. My mailbox was overflowing. I met people in the business and had lunch with them. They promised me more work. The reason was simple. I was never choosy about the jobs I did. I was willing to do anything. I met my deadlines. I never complained. I wrote legibly. And I was thorough. Where others slacked off, I did an honest write. I was never snide, even when the pay was low. If I got a call at 2:30 in the morning asking for 20 pages of text about, say, something, the advantages of non-digital clocks or appeal of women in their 40s or the most beautiful spots in Helsinki, where, needless to say, I'd never been. By 6 a.m., I'd have it done by 5:30. And if they called back for a rewrite, I had it to them by 6. You bet I had a good reputation. The same as for shoveling snow. Let it snow and I'll show you a thing or two about efficient road work. And with not one speck of ambition, not one iota of expectation. My only concern was to do things systematically, from one end to the other. I sometimes wonder if this might not prove to be the bane of my life. After wasting so much pulp and ink myself, who was I to complain about waste? We live in an advanced capitalist society after all. Waste is the name of the game, its greatest virtue. Politicians call it refinements in domestic consumption. I call it meaningless waste. A difference of opinion, which doesn't change the way we live. If I don't like it, I can move to Bangladesh or Sudan. I, for one, am not eager to live in Bangladesh or Sudan. So I kept working. And soon enough, it wasn't just PR work. I got called to do bits and pieces for regular magazines, for some reason, mostly women's magazines. I started doing interviews, minor legwork reportages, but really, the work wasn't much of an improvement over PR newsletters. Due to the nature of these magazines, most of the people I had to interview were in show business. No matter what you asked them, they had the only stock replies. You could predict what they'd answer before you asked the question. In the worst cases, the man's ego would insist on seeing questions in advance, so I always came with everything written out. Once I asked a 17-year-old singer something that wasn't on the list, which caused our manager to pipe up. That wasn't what we agreed on. She doesn't have to answer that. That was a kick. I wondered if the girl couldn't answer what month followed October without this manager by her side. Still, I did my best. Before each interview, I did my homework, surveyed available sources, tried to come up with questions others wouldn't think to ask. I took pains structuring the article. Not that these efforts received any special recognition. They never got me an appreciative word. I went the extra step because, for me, it was the simplest way. Self-discipline. Giving my disused fingers and head a practical and, if at all possible, harmless dose of overwork. Social rehabilitation. After that, my days were busier than ever, not only with double or triple my regular load, but with a lot of rush jobs too. Without fail, jobs that had no takers found their way to me. My role in those circles was the junkyard at the edge of town. Anything, particularly if complicated or a pain, would get hauled to me for disposal. By the way of thanks, my savings account swelled to figures I'd never seen the likes of, though I was too busy to spend much of it. So when a guy I knew offered me a good deal, I got rid of my nothing but headaches car and bought his year-old Subaru Leon. Hardly any miles on it, stereo and air conditioning, a real first for me. And I moved to an apartment in Shibuya, closer to the center of town. It was a bit noisy, the expressway passing right outside my window, but you got used to it. I slept with a few women I met through work, social rehabilitation. I had a sense about which women I ought to sleep with and which women I'd be able to sleep with, which not. Maybe even which I shouldn't sleep with. It's an intelligence that comes with age. I also knew when to call it quits, all very nice and easy, so no one got hurt. The only thing missing was those dogs on the heartstrings. The deepest I got involved was with a woman who worked at the phone company. I met her at a New Year's party. Both of us were tipsy. We joked with each other, liked each other, and ended up back at my place. She had a good head on her shoulders and terrific legs. We went for rides in my new used Subaru. She'd call whenever the mood struck and come over and spend the night. She was the only relationship with one foot in the door like that. Though both of us knew there was no place in this thing could go, still we quietly shared something approaching a pardon from life. I knew days of peace for the first time in ages. We exchanged tenderness, talked in whispers. I cooked for her, gave her birthday presents. We'd go to jazz clubs and have cocktails. We never argued, not once. We knew exactly what we wanted in each other. Even so, it ended. One day it stopped, as if the film simply slipped off the reel. Her departure left me emptier than I would have suspected. For a while, I stayed in again. The problem was that I hadn't wanted her, really wanted her. I liked her, liked being with her. She brought me back to gentle feelings. But what it came down to was I never felt a need for her. Not 3 days after she got out of my life, the realization hit home that ultimately all the time I'd been next to her, I might as well have been on the moon. The whole while I'd felt her breast against me, I'd really wanted something else. It took 4 years to get my life back on steady ground. I carefully dispatched each piece of work that came my way, and people came to feel they could depend on me. Not many, but a few even became friendly. Though it goes without saying that wasn't enough. Not enough at all. Here I'd spent all this time trying to get up to speed, and I was back to where I started. Okay, I thought, age 34, square one. What do you do now? I didn't have to think much about that one. I knew already. The answer had been floating over my head like a dark, dense cloud. All I had to do was take action instead of putting it off and putting it off. I had to go to the Dolphin Hotel. That's where it all started. I also had to find her, the woman who'd first guided me to the Dolphin Hotel, she who'd been a high-class girl in her own covert world of night. Under astonishing circumstances, I was to learn this nameless woman's name sometime later, but for reasons of convenience, unorthodox as it will seem, I'll tell it to you now. Pardon me, please. It was Kiki. Yes, Kiki held the key. I had to call her back to me, to a life with me she'd left never to return. Was it possible? Who knew? But I had to try. From then would begin a new cycle. I packed my bags, did double time to finish up outstanding work, then canceled all the jobs I'd penciled in for the next month. I said I was leaving Tokyo on family business. A couple of editors made noises, but what could they do? I'd never let them down before, and besides, I was giving them plenty of advance notice to find other ways and means. In the end, it was fine. I'd be back in a month, I told them. Then I took a flight to Hokkaido. This was the beginning of March 1983. Of course, the family business wasn't over in anything near a month.